Hi, guys. It's Josh Rubin here with the Rubin Special. We have our friend Gary Gold. He's trying to find me on Instagram. Gary, thanks so much for joining us from Los Angeles and Beverly Hills.
How's it going?
Oh, it's going pretty well, thanks. I just wanted to see how things are going out in Los Angeles today. I know you're trying to find me on Instagram. I don't know if this is going to work or not, but we're here together, which is most important.
There we go. Send request. I think that may have worked. If it does, great. If not, what the hell? How you doing?
I'm doing well, thanks. So we're trying to do two things at the same time, which is to go Facebook Live and Instagram Live. So I'm hoping that the Instagram thing chops in, but if it doesn't, so be it. You guys on Instagram should be following us on the Rubin Special on the Rubin team at Facebook. So Gary from Los Angeles, what is going on in LA today?
Today in LA, you know what? Maybe I'm just dead inside, but I have not had I don't think this thing has had such a huge impact on what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis. I'm doing the same thing I did before, except, I'm the actual coming to show houses. I'm doing that less, but everything else I'm just doing a little bit more. So I think there's enough, our industry has just been prepared to handle this kind of thing. Not like we had some drill, but we've been showing houses online for years. The first and second time people see houses, it's online. So that just really hasn't changed. So I think it's changed less than we think it has.
Yeah. There's a lot of uncertainty out there. It's almost like we're operating in a little bit of a vacuum because people don't know. Is it okay to go out? Is it okay to walk into this person's house? Is it okay for this person to walk into my house? We just don't know. So what we're there to do is to educate people. As Tom Ferry said the other day, look at the data. Let's not act on emotion, but let's look at the data and let's actually focus on facts. So it's up to us to actually be the information broker, if you will. We're not just selling real estate, but we're helping people understand the facts so that they can make informed decisions. And the more informed decisions that people make, the more likely it is that they're going to be comfortable doing whatever it is that they plan to do, whether it's sell, buy, stay. And with that said, we need to help people put one foot in front of the other.
I went through the same process that first week. I've been through a lot of ups and downs. I've been doing this long enough where I've definitely had some shitty times. And I remember when this happened, I was really nervous. And I remember something Steve Harney had said in the last 6 recessions, only one of them negatively impacted real estate. So I started to look about where were we before this all started a couple months ago. And if you looked at the numbers, they were really strong. In our town, and it's probably very similar in other people's, prices have been going up for 11 years. Inventory has been shrinking for 12 years. Interest rates are at a 40-year low. People are not using their house like a bank account, so they're not leveraged on it. People own a lot, I think half the country has less than 50% own other property. So you look at all those facts, I go, even if this has an impact, like right now at 4 months inventory, if it went up 50% to 6 months, that's still a healthy market. No one's anticipating prices going down, but if they did go down 10, 15%, which is a lot, that's just rolling it back a couple of years. That's not rolling it back to the Stone Ages. The average person who sells their house has been in it 13 years. So if they don't double their money, they only make 80% of their money. It's still great. Developers have bought these houses. Developers, if they make a little bit less, they're still going to do really, really well. So I don't think prices are going down, but I think real estate is on a different trajectory than the economy, at least in the short term.
I wouldn't be surprised if you're right. New York City has actually seen softening the last 3 years. Ever since Donald Trump was elected president, there's been one uncertainty after another. That said, if let's say you're in a stock and the stock goes roaring over the last month, which a lot of stocks have done. I've been watching some stocks that have doubled in no time, and no one ever anticipated this. They came out of the March lows, and they literally doubled or tripled in some cases in just the last month. It's crazy. So if you're in one of those stocks and the stock goes down 20%, well, I got news for you. You're still up 80%, but you're going to say, but I was up 100% and I thought it had more room to go. Well, guess what? Maybe you were wrong. Okay. So if you're in one of these houses that in 2015, 2016, you could have sold for 5 million, and today you could sell for 4 million, and you bought it for 2 million, well, you're still doubling your money. So, maybe now is still a good time to downsize, upsize, move, take advantage and move to the pied-à-terre in the city from your house on Long Island. I mean, who's to say when the time is right for you? But to judge based on, where the market is today or tomorrow, we're talking about houses that people are actually going to use for the next 5 or more years.
The one thing interesting that I look at, and I really don't have a lot of, when things happen, if a deal falls out or something happens, I don't immediately go, shit, this is bad. I'm like, because I don't know how things will play out. I remember when there was the writer's strike, it was maybe 20 years ago. And all of a sudden, the networks had nothing to show, and they started showing these reality shows. They had a couple of them. And as a result of a writer's strike, all of a sudden, reality shows became a big thing. In this situation, I think that, some unintended consequences are going to come out of this. First of all, people around the world have been quarantined basically in their home. Literally everywhere in the world, everyone's had to stay home for the last 2 months. I think that's going to have a positive impact on the intrinsic value of your home, especially what we do in the luxury space. If somebody has the money and they can afford it, and they say, next time this happens, or if anything like this happens, I want a screening room. I want a bigger kitchen. I want an office in my house. I think this is going to cause that part is going to make a lot of people wanting to buy, sell, and trade houses. And I don't think that people today think houses are worth less than they did 2 months ago. I think they think intrinsically they're worth more.
I absolutely agree. And I think that we're going to see values go up as a result of this. Never in our lifetimes, and in fact, in the last 100 years, have we ever been forced to stay home. Yes, we've seen recessions. Yes, we've seen bear markets. We've seen bull markets. But in all that time, no one has been forced to really stay in their home and focus on both what they love about it and guess what they hate about it. That's why when this all started, I forecasted that we're going to see a boom in real estate because people are going to be more prone to move. We're going to see a higher degree of a nesting instinct. And guess what? The downside of that is we're going to be spending time with our spouses, and we're going to figure out what we really love about them and what we really don't love about them. And so we're going to see divorce rates increase as a result. But, we're actually going to see people move because they're going to say, hey, we need more space, or hey, this is too much space, or we don't quite like the lot size that we're on, or, the apartment size. We're living in a studio apartment. I've sold more than my fair share of cramped spaces with families of 4. I had a 1-bedroom that I sold a few years ago that had very high ceilings and had a loft in the bedroom. So the parents were sleeping up in the loft in the bedroom, and at the foot of the stairs leading down from the loft was a bunk bed that the 2 kids were in. At the foot of the bed, they had a giant cage with a chinchilla in it. And that was in a 1-bedroom apartment. I'll bet you they're grateful that they actually sold that apartment when they did.
Oh, there was no action going on there. I don't want to get the chinchilla part involved. I don't even know what that means. But yeah, I think, you know what? You just never know how things play out. Another thing that could have a positive, definitely, there's some things out there that could have a negative impact on the real estate market. People are losing their jobs. There's been wealth that's been lost, a lot of uncertainty, but a couple of things we've already discussed. Another thing that could have a very positive impact on real estate is the government has literally been printing trillions of dollars. That money didn't just appear somewhere. They literally printed trillions of dollars, which at some point devalues the dollar. I think what's probably keeping the dollar strong is everyone else is printing trillions of dollars too, and we're still the best thing. But when that happens, smart people want to have their money in tangible assets because that's the only way to beat dollars going down is if you have actual hard assets. So that could have a positive impact. So I think the combination of the positive and the negative things going on now is just going to leave us at a fairly positive place. Long term, this is I don't really know. Long term, I'm not sure how this will play out, but I think this year is going to be very strong real estate market.
It all depends on how we define long term, right? I mean, right now we're one day at a time.
Next Friday, that's long term.
Exactly. We're seeing these governors of these various states. Some are opening, in the case of Florida, in the case of Texas, Michigan, which was a hot spot in Detroit. That's actually opening because people showed up at the Capitol protesting, armed with weapons, and saying you're affecting our Bill of Rights. So at the end of the day, Gary, we're really looking at these stay-at-home orders. Some are extended. Pennsylvania's still we're non-essential in Pennsylvania. In New York, we're essential, but we can't actually meet with people to show property. So we're doing everything virtually. But longer term, we're looking at 6 months, 12 months, 24 or more months. So what I see happening is a very robust summer. I just got off the phone with Douglas Elliman, Chief Operating Officer Scott Durkin, and Scott is saying that we're definitely going to see a robust summer. But he agrees with me in saying we're probably going to see some uncertainty as volatility picks up in equity markets as we get close to the election cycle. And then it's going to be a fairly busy first quarter of 21. And then I think it's going to be off to the races. A lot of people in New York, I saw an interview with Barbara Corcoran and Leonard Steinberg the other day. Barbara's saying that this reminds her of September 11th, where there's a sense of fear and uncertainty. But next thing you know, this is almost like I told someone earlier, my friends J.D. Leonard and Tom Toole, Joe Biggs, I was saying that this is like a rubber band, and you bring it back and you bring it back and you bring it back, and the further you bring it back and then you let it go is the more energy that it has in the opposite effect, because for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's what happens to the market, and I wouldn't be surprised if it has a longer lasting effect than we think, and people are going to be looking back at these last couple of months saying, oh, wow, that was an amazing opportunity. I would have bought that house for that price had I known the sellers were that flexible. Are you seeing any great deals being done anecdotally in your local market?
Well, I want to mention one thing and then I'll get into that. Everyone you just described, Leonard Steinberg, Barbara Corcoran, the guy from Douglas Elliman, you're all from New York. And New York is like ground zero, and it's so concentrated and intense, and it's just not like that in the rest of the country. Also, all the media is pretty much all based in New York. So I don't think what you're experiencing is quite as intense as what other people are experiencing. And I also thought like the election could have an impact, but if you look at the statistics, elections really don't have that big of an impact on real estate, maybe on the economy, but not on real estate. In terms of good deals, first of all, I think there's always an opportunity to get a great deal in a good market and to get a bad deal in a good market and vice versa. So I think you should always look for a good opportunity. But I would say early on, definitely, I have clients, and I still have clients that even though they think that we're heading into something that's going to be good, maybe someone who has something worth 25 million might sell it for $1 million less just for peace of mind, just to hedge their bet. They're still making money. You could say the same thing for 2.5 million. So I think that there are people right now that would probably take a little bit of a discount for peace of mind and not to deal with the uncertainty. I think that that's going to evaporate really quickly because I just think every indication is that demand is up. HomeLight and Zillow and those companies that, do iBuying.
Yep.
They stopped buying at the beginning and they started buying again. And those guys are all just numbers guys. There's no emotion there. And they're buying because they will not, those guys can't buy in a declining market. Their margins are too thin. So when they start buying, that is a telltale sign that prices are stabilized or going up, or they're just not going to buy. So I think that the deal opportunities are probably going to be evaporating soon, other than the normal deals you can get under any circumstances. There are people, we deal with a lot of things where the buyer has to show up. It's not like something on a shelf that's that much of a commodity. It's more of a luxury item. And there's people who need to sell and need to sell now. And often the best deals are people who've overpriced their home in the first place. And now 9 months later, they really need to sell it. And they kind of have worn out their welcome on the market. And then they just go, screw it, I just want to sell it. And they end up selling it for 10% less than they could have if they played it right the first time. That happens a lot.
That's an interesting point, Gary. And I often tell sellers who are speaking to multiple brokers that, they want to price it here. The market is indicating that we're here. We're in a declining market. So to price it exactly where the market says, you're likely to continue to miss the market, and you're going to wind up chasing the market down. And the best way to price in any market is so that the market is at your back. If you price with the market at your back in an accelerating market, then you're going to get offers above the asking price. And in a declining market, if you price slightly ahead of the market, you're going to get offers at your asking price. But never are you in this case where you're in an equal and opposite reaction mode, or what I call a pendulum effect. If somehow you have a crystal ball and your price is supposed to be right in the middle of that arc of the pendulum, and you price it too far to the right, meaning above where you would realistically expect it to trade, to add in some padding for negotiation, as some people tend to do, well, you're likely to see that pendulum come back and swing and wind up in the opposite end of the spectrum, meaning you're going to sell it for less than you could have had you priced it to be priced it accurately to begin with.
We have it in LA. Like, I have a little additional challenge than you do. You sell primarily apartments, correct?
Yes.
Very easy to quantify in New York City: location, view, size, ceiling, floor. So it's I would assume it's very easy to quantify. You guys are selling feet. I'm pricing properties and selling properties where it's somewhat arbitrary what it's worth. It's not an exact number. It's like we know within a certain extent, but it's really, really arbitrary. So we have to do a lot. It's different. So we have that definitely challenge, that we don't know exactly what these houses are worth when we're listing it. No one does. I guess.
Well, what do you do in a situation like that? Because I know you've been in that position many times before. Many times. So how do you approach the seller in a situation where it's not like talking to your buddy Josh Rubin in New York, and you can't just say, I have no idea what.
First of all, I tell them that. I said, let me give you some inside baseball. You could have 5 people come here and tell you what they think it's worth, and there's a swing. Just depending on a lot of situations, you could have a 10-15% swing either way. So I tell them that it is somewhat arbitrary what we're talking about here. There aren't exact comps for it. I do something I call triangulation. Like when I sold the Playboy Mansion, nothing had ever sold for $100 million. I literally had nothing to compare it to. And then we sold one for 150 2 years later, and the same thing, we had nothing to compare it to. But it's more of a thesis. It's like, if this sold for this and that sold for that, and you add these different factors, you start piecing together, and then it looks like we're going to hit there, give or take. And that's how it happens. Now, once you put it on the market, one thing that it sounds a little scary, people don't know what it's worth. What if you miss the market and you actually sell for 20% less and you don't know that? It doesn't really work out that way. You get 2 wealthy people together and you get them to start negotiating. They find, literally 99 out of 100 times, they find that perfect price. Those 2 guys are going to figure it out. And between the negotiation process and between time on the market, it's amazing how that price comes together.
Walk us through a little bit, since you brought it up. The Playboy Mansion, that was your first, I trust that was your first 9-digit transaction, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And at the time, wasn't that a record for Los Angeles and all of California for a residential sale?
I'm the Roger Bannister of high-end real estate in Beverly Hills. Yes. So it's actually in Holmby Hills. So that was the first house to ever sell for $100 million. Interestingly, in 72, it sold. It was the first house to ever sell for $1 million.
Wow. So it's interesting. So Hefner bought it in 72 for $1 million. $1 million. Is that right?
$1 million. Yes.
And then he held on to it. And in that time, he did some living there, no doubt. But then you turned around, you sold it, what was it, 2 or 3 years ago now?
It was 16. Was it 16 or 17? That's
Okay.
probably 3 years ago, something like
I
that.
think it was about 3 years ago, if memory serves. So when you sold the Playboy Mansion for $100 million, you walked in to this initial meeting, and I assume pricing was discussed at this initial meeting with I think it was some trustees that you dealt with, if memory serves. And how did you discuss pricing? How did you approach it? And what properties did you cite as examples of the so-called triangulation, as you put it earlier?
Right. Well, there were a couple houses that sold in like 70 and 80, and definitely use those as comparison. We said this is probably one of the few houses that actually has additional value based on what it is. And
what it is, meaning the sort of
in the
panache.
Playboy Mansion. A lot of people think because some celebrity, Johnny Depp, lived in a house that's worth more money. In general, usually that's not the case, but in this case,
Right.
maybe the most famous residence in the world. So
Yeah.
we thought that had an extra cachet to it. We gave it a range. Turns out it's exactly what we thought it was going to sell for, $100 million. So we were right on with that. But it was, it definitely was just a thesis. It was a evaluation. It wasn't a fact.
But you brought it on, Gary, not at $100 million. You brought it on at a number that was quite a bit higher than that.
If you consider 200 million more, I would agree with that. You'd say it's higher.
So that's like the average home sale in New York City being $2 million. That's like bringing that $2 million apartment on the market at $4 million, knowing that it's probably going to sell for $2 million. So that wouldn't necessarily translate in most markets. Or, let's say you're selling an $800,000 home in Wellesley, Massachusetts, bringing that on for almost $2 million. So
when we sell these big houses, we do things a little different. I didn't necessarily in a vacuum make that decision myself to bring it out at 200.
Right.
But we did it in that particular case. It probably didn't matter that much. And we found a buyer immediately. And it took months to negotiate, and it took a few different buyers to kind of create the market. That's what made that one sell, is we had 3 people that wanted it. And then all of a sudden it became very clear what it was worth. So in that case, I didn't have a choice. We just priced it that because that's what the consensus was, what they wanted to do. But it was so high profile. We didn't even put it in the MLS, and we didn't even really spend much money on advertising. It just
advertised itself almost. Once it was available, word got out and it traveled like wildfire. And then, the buyers came a calling.
Well, the neighbor bought it. So anyone out there that doesn't think door knocking doesn't work, guess again.
So what did you do? Just buzz on the gate like Lil Dicky?
The neighbor that we actually knew that we probably knew he was our buyer. He was the most likely one, but there was a number of buyers, and he just ended up prevailing. So
that's interesting. In New York, we have a saying that there's only one person who's going to pay more for a property than somebody else, and that's the person who lives immediately next door, because people are living in these, 1,000 plus or minus square feet apartments. And when people start, getting together with somebody else and having kids, they need more space, and they love their building, they love their location, they can't find exactly what they're looking for. And, they're looking for certainty, of course. So when you combine all those factors, breaking through the neighbor's apartment often makes a lot of sense.
Right. Do you live in the city in like one of these condos, or where do you live?
So, that's a great question, Gary. And I'm asked that all the time. And the truth is that I live in the moment.
Very nice. Oh, by the way, people don't, they probably think you're like this New York guy that's, just made it on his own, and, not like you went to Harvard or anything, but he's a very sophisticated guy. I've had breakfast with him twice, and both times this is how elevated he is and cultured. He had salad with his eggs.
That's true. I did, but that was probably in my non-gluten phase. And by now I'm about 4 months gluten. So
high gluten.
Yeah. So that said, Gary, tell us a little bit about how you got into the business.
Last thing I wanted to do was be in real estate. I wanted to be a stand-up comedian. I wanted to be like a cast member of SNL. I just didn't know how to do that. And my brother was in real estate. And this is back a long time ago when like the average age of a real estate agent where we lived was dead. So it wasn't a cool business, but my brother was this young, cool guy, and he started making a lot of money, and he really stood out because he was like 21 and good looking. And he said, come work for me and I'll buy you a car. I had recently tried to paint a car and I ruined it. So I went and worked for him, and I was this creative person. And my brother said, we want to do some marketing. And he said, do whatever you want. So for me, I handled it like a comedian. And we did all these really outrageous, comedic, fun things no one had ever done anything like that. Now, there's a lot of people with personal brands and they're very outrageous, but that wasn't happening back then. So I'm sure I wasn't the only one, but I'm one of the first people to kind of like treat a real estate agent like a surfer or a skateboarder or someone with like a personal brand. And I didn't know I was doing that. I was just being a smart ass. But my brother was so successful in our marketing campaign. He was one guy, and we seemed bigger than these huge offices because we were just doing so much business. So I got in it doing his marketing. And then one day he came to me and said, I'm out of residential. I'm going to do this thing in commercial. It's all yours. And I just took over that division. So I started with all this business. My brother, it's interesting. My brother became this commercial agent doing these full floor leases of office buildings for this guy named Paul Fegan all over the country. He made millions of dollars. But Paul Fegan had this idea of taking a full floor or 2 or 3 floors in an office building and adding a law library and a receptionist and a conference room so a single attorney could appear like he's in a sophisticated office, and made a fortune and really invented what WeWork is.
Wow. So he was specific to the law profession?
Yeah.
Huh.
Other people could go there, but it was pretty much for lawyers because they needed law offices and law libraries and copiers and receptionists. And that would, it was prohibitive to do that. This is before computers. So overnight, my brother just said, it's yours. So I was 17, 18 years old and selling big, expensive houses. So I was fortunate in that respect.
And this was all based in Los Angeles County?
Yes. That started in the Valley. And then when I was 30, I moved to Beverly Hills. Huh. And that's where, I was selling big houses in the San Fernando Valley, but Jeff Hyland recruited me to move to Beverly Hills. I got rid of my business. And that's when things got very real in terms of big houses. And wow. That's how it started. But I it wasn't until 2006 that I started to like this business. I wanted to be like a comedian or a writer. And right. Then when computers and internet and marketing and working with developers all came around, I remember I said something to myself, it was the best thing I ever said to myself. What can I do in real estate that feels as creative as when I'm writing a screenplay or I'm doing stand-up? Because doing those things was ruining my real estate business where I was making money. And all of a sudden, with the internet and marketing and as helping developers design buildings, I started looking at everything I do in real estate in a creative way. And all of a sudden, I loved it. I figured out I didn't necessarily need to be a member of SNL or a comedian. I needed to be creative. So ever since then, I really approach everything with my creative, abstract mind. And I love this business. There's so much you can do there. We can be whatever the hell we want to be. And it's actually a neat business. There's a lot of innovative people out there doing business. A lot.
Yeah, it's interesting. It tends to be a magnet for us artists, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah.
You wouldn't think that. That's why people, it's a really interesting, there's like 1 million real estate agents and we're all like these little promoters, and people do it in so many ways. There's some really crazy, outrageous people, but there's so many different ways to be a real estate agent. But the one thing we all have in common is I think we're pretty advanced when it comes to technology and marketing, and we got to do a ton of things. When I started in real estate, it was a very simple business. And now we have to do so many things. We're psychologists. We understand construction. We understand finance, psychology, law, marketing, technology. It's the people that are good like me and you, and there happens to be just a lot of us, pretty impressive what we do.
It really is. And, we also have to have extraordinarily good intuition. And I remember from the time that I was little, I had extremely high degree of what they call street smarts, which is really just savvy and awareness of your surroundings. And, I'm doing a negotiation now, and we had a second showing yesterday with the buyers. So I assumed that their broker would be in touch and say, okay, showing went well. We're on track. Let's go. Didn't hear from the broker right away. So I called him. He didn't pick up. I texted him. No response. About an hour later, I called him again. He picked right up, said, oh, yeah, sorry, I was with my kids, because he sent his assistant to do the second showing. And I said, well, tell me what's going on. Are we on track? And he said, I'm not sure. I haven't heard from the girls, but I assume we are. Otherwise, they would have let me know. And I said, okay, well, send me the deal sheet. And he didn't send me the deal sheet. And then this morning, I sent him a text at 8 o'clock. No response. I sent him another text at 10 o'clock. I said, do we have something to be concerned about here? So he said, well, I called them at 9 and they said they'd call me back, and I haven't heard from them. So I'm really not sure. And I said, sounds like a case of cold feet here. And, there's nothing specific that tells me that they don't want to proceed. It's just the pattern of communication was interrupted. And so, I got the sense that, maybe we're not on track, which is, not surprising given the climate out there. But, it's just, these very little, slight little, what they call in the casino, a tell, right?
100%. Like, we're like poker players. I yesterday called a client I have a listing with. It's co-listed with a couple other agents. And I just called him and I said, you're planning on canceling the listing with us in 4 days. I know it. Call me. Let's talk about that. He didn't say it. He didn't tell me we would do that. I just could tell based on a couple different patterns. When people call me, because I get calls I have these crazy expensive listings, and I get a lot of effectively crank calls, or people out of their mind, or people doing some kind of hustle. So we get all kinds of calls that we have to qualify people. I can tell if someone's a real buyer with literally the moment they utter a word. I know if they're a buyer. And people go, how do you do that? And I said, it's not what people, it's the question. People who have a lot of money and want to buy a house, and it probably would work at any price range, they ask certain questions. And people that aren't, and there's some kind of game, they don't ask those same questions.
That's right. I've had experiences with those people, believe it or not, where I thought from the outset, okay, something seems off here, but I'm going to go with it and see what happens. I've been surprised. These people have shown up with literal bags of cash at my listings, to buy them. Maybe it's not an overnight thing, but ultimately they pan out. And, my dad, who's also in sales, and he was really my sort of entree to the profession from the time that I was young. He has an expression that is that the wrong thing works enough times that sometimes it winds up being the right thing. So you just never know. You have to know, how to guard against it and how to qualify. And if you get that spidey sense, ask for people's proof of funds. And if they have it, great. And if they don't, well, then to pivot and move along.
It's a really good point. I often will be talking with a partner or someone I work with or my client and saying, how do you know this guy's real? And I said, you know what? I don't know he's real, but I'm going to play this hand. This one I'm going to play. That guy's not worth it. We make those decisions. But yeah, there's plenty of times where I don't know if someone's real, but I'm just willing to play it out. And so, but at least I have in my mind, I have that sense that maybe there's something not right. But then there's a lot that is just plain out. This is not worth our time. And and ask for proof of funds or ask for a couple things. And if that doesn't play out, then, they walk.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I tell people all the time that 90% of what I do is actually a waste of my time. You just don't know. So you got to throw 100% against the wall to get that 10%. And that 10% has enabled me to be, one of the most successful real estate professionals in the country.
I like that. One of the things I think all the time is that we're in the business of getting people to sign paper. And like in any particular deal, from the beginning to the end, there might be 20 different times someone has to sign something that pushes along. And that's all we're doing is like, just get them to sign the next piece of paper, the next one, push it closer and closer and closer.
Yeah.
I also I don't get too hung up in the ultimate outcome. I'm really just looking at the next step, moving something up to the next step. I definitely want to have sold some of these epic sales that virtually seemed impossible, or even gotten them if I didn't just do, okay, what's the next step to getting this listing or making this sale? And just make these little steps, and eventually some of them happen. That's how it works. Nothing magic beyond that.
Just course corrections along the way, and sometimes it winds up paying off, and sometimes you wind up moving on to your next opportunity. I mean,
I got into developments for like 6 or 7 years in the early 2000s, and I got my head handed to me. I went all in on developments, spent a lot of money and all my time, and kind of almost abandoned my resale business. And it just destroyed me in so many ways. But when I got back, I had learned so much about marketing and technology in doing developments. And I would have never gotten the big sales I got if it wasn't for the relationships and the lessons I learned in that process.
Huh. That's interesting. So you went into development work in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
And you practically shelved your resale business.
I did.
So how did you then come out of that and sort of rebuild your new development business, and redevelop your resale business, I should say, and how did you sort of rebuild it?
I'll tell you exactly what happened. So it was very obvious this happened. I mean, it literally went broke. There was one thing that happened during the developments that was like interesting to me is someone had told me about Zillow at the time. And I just thought in Beverly Hills, Zillow, no one used it. It seems silly, but the guy says, this really works. So I had these big budgets for developments, and I started experimenting with the developers' money and those projects. He said, let's put a little money towards Zillow. Now, the one thing when you would buy display ads for Zillow back then, as a side, if you advertised in Beverly Hills, they give you that ad on the right, which now is their product. That was a giveaway. They would give you that if you did a display ad in the top or on a banner. So I had all these ads with my face on it. I didn't even know they were coming in all of Beverly Hills. I bought all of Beverly Hills and then the Sunset Strip. So when I got rid of the developments, I started getting phone calls from all these people from Zillow. I didn't even know where they were coming from. It took a second to put it together. So when I got out of developments, I said, okay, I need to reinvent myself. I want to be the most technologically and marketing advanced guy in the business who's got also 30 years of experience. That combination, I think, is a real winner. But it took a while for me to go to people and say, I advertise online. They just didn't even understand what I was talking about. But I kept those zip codes from Zillow, and I killed it on Zillow. Killed it. And I mean, there's a lot of famous people that I would get a call at 11 o'clock at night or an email, and like celebrities, and I was doing deals with them. And I was responding to people in China and celebrities that are on their plane late at night. And I figured out.
I'm sorry, just hang on 1 second there, Gary. So you're telling me that, an A-list celebrity is on Zillow, clicking on your face and saying, please call me.
They're asking about a property, and I would respond to them. And I got that, and a lot of foreigners too. And I figured out if I responded on people's own time, like if someone was calling from another time zone, whether it was China, and I responded late at night, I beat everybody out. But there was really no one else on Zillow in Beverly Hills. So I was getting all the action, and that really got me back in action. And I started to build the story that I'm the guy who is marketing things online and telling people this is how houses were selling. I remember going on listing appointments at the beginning, and everyone looked like the RCA dog with just like, what are you talking about? And it didn't work. It took a while for people to get it, but that's how I built my entire business. So when you say the people weren't getting it, what weren't they getting exactly? They didn't believe me that celebrities or people buying $3 or $4 or $5 or $6 or $10 million homes were looking online, and that's how they were on Zillow. They just didn't believe that's how houses were selling.
Got it.
it was before real estate agents weren't either. All you need to do to kind of secure your listing back at the time is register for Zillow, and then your name would be on the side of the property, and no one was doing it. So my face was on all those.
So you're an early adopter.
I was an early adopter. And I remember going, and I also said, I'm going to check. I was going to Pacific Coast Builders Conference. I said, I'm going to stop that. I'm going to go check out this Inman thing. And I remember going up in Inman, like in 2009 or something. I remember going up on the plane in San Francisco. And I remember walking down the aisle, and everyone on the plane was on a smartphone or an iPad. iPad had been out for 2 months. And I go, I am entering the twilight zone. What's going on? And I remember walking into 3,000 people at Inman. At that time, very few real estate agents were there. It was all vendors. And everyone was on a laptop or an iPad, which, as I said, was 2 months old. And I said, there's a different world going on here. And I remember meeting Spencer and Greg from Zillow, and I became friendly with them because I was starting to really leverage Zillow, and no one else was doing the high-end stuff. And that's how I got that. I've reinvented myself several times in real estate, and that was, I would say, the latest. And it was fun, and I really found something that worked. But I was up Schitt's Creek at the time when I got back, and I remember I tried to get a $3 million listing when I just got back, and they said, "Show me your track record," and I didn't have a recent one to show them.
Well, Gary, I remember that you and I were on a panel a year or two ago about, specifically, we were talking about luxury. Mm-hmm. And, what's interesting is you and I had a very similar opinion, because in the audience, we had people ranging from people who had some of our experience to people who were brand new to the business. And people said, well, let's say you don't have that track record. What do you do?
Oh, well, the key, what I did and what I've done and what now I'm getting it's paying back on the other way, is you co-opt someone who does. That's one way to do it, is you co-opt someone who does. I remember, and also when you do, so let's just say you have an opportunity to get a big listing and you get it and you bring in someone else that's got that leverage, you then that's now on your record. You have to take that sale and you've got to leverage and market that sale. And that's what you start selling yourself on. And I remember doing it. So I remember I sold Ashton Kutcher's house. It was $1.6 million, but he was a celebrity. And I started leveraging that. And then
so I'm sorry, you sold Ashton's house for $1.6 million.
Yeah.
You leveraged it.
Yes.
Can you tell us specifically what you did to leverage it?
I got some press from it. And then I would say, I'm the guy who does this, work with celebrities and blah, blah, blah. And that was what I did. And then I remember, then I sold a house to a couple Chinese people for like $6 million. And at the time, people were thinking Chinese buyers were the cure for everything. And I started to leverage that. I am up and I'm responding to people at 11 at night when my competitors are asleep. And I'm actually getting people flying in from Hong Kong and buying houses. And that was the next thing I started to sell myself at. Sell what you got. But if you're new and you're trying to break into luxury, co-opt agents that have the experience at front. And number two, if you know a marketplace, wherever it is, someplace, let's just use New York. If there was a certain area and you knew every square inch of it in terms of real estate, anyone will go out with a buyer. If you run into somebody or you have the opportunity to just have that moment, we all have moments where someone says they're looking for something and you say, I've got the property for you because you really know this market. You don't have to have a reputation or anything. Anyone would literally go out with any agent that said he had the right thing and said the right things and said, you're looking for this kind of loft or this kind of townhouse. I've got it. It's at this price, not on the market. You should come see it. It's exactly what you're looking for. People don't care who you are at that point. People care who they list their home with. But you can have these chance meetings where if you really know the market and someone says something and you can identify the right thing, they'll go out with anyone.
I'm smiling, Gary, because, a lot of this has come up in these conversations that we've had the last few weeks. And, now what you say matters more than ever. Right. And people can smell your mindset. People can detect your experience, and people can get a real sense of, your knowledge, bottom line, and whether you're operating from a place of fear or a place of conviction. And what I've learned from our friends and colleagues the last few weeks is that the market is alive and well. You have New York and LA, you have Seattle, and these are areas that are more impacted by the virus than others. Mm-hmm. So there's probably a higher degree of uncertainty. LA, you just started to be able to show houses again in the last couple of weeks. In New York, yes, we're essential, but we can't actually meet with people to show apartments or houses for that matter. Some are showing, some aren't. We have to be very careful about how we do it, take the necessary precautions. But, you really need to be communicating with people, and you need to be saying the right things. And those things are the facts. It's not about what I heard. And, just this morning, I saw a headline posted by a friend of mine on Facebook that said that Cuomo extended the stay-at-home order in New York until June 15th. And then somebody else said in the comments, no, it's June 6th. And the truth is that no one really knows, because the messaging from the governor has been a little uncertain. And, what I see the governor saying is that there are areas that are opening, and that, they're needing to meet certain thresholds, which is smart. But at the end of the day, we're going to have to reopen. We're going to have to reopen as a state. We're going to have to reopen as a city, and we're going to have to get back to normal, but we're going to have to take necessary precautions. And it's going to be one step at a time.
In your neighborhood, whether it's open or not, buyers and sellers they're plotting right now. They're looking online. They're figuring things out. There's business to do. There might be a lot of preparation business that you might do throughout the year. You're doing it all. You're like front loading that all. So you've got all this and happening, but everything's happening. It's just happening in a different order. So I think right now I'm as busy as ever doing things. Now, what I'm doing now might be something that I used to do the whole year, and now I'm just doing. As Tom says, loading the cannon. People are out there looking, figuring out what their next step is. So business is alive right now. And there's one thing else. I remember I said this to myself, and it really resonated. My personal performance and attitude is more powerful and equally as devastating as any pandemic. I mean, I don't think that is an excuse what's happening for your business. I know that I've done really good in really bad markets, and I know I've done really bad in really good markets. And I know that I can make or break my business, and what I'm personally doing and what's going in between my ears and the actions I'm taking have a far bigger impact than what's happening out there, like this pandemic that's occurring.
It's interesting that you say that, because what you're describing is a lot of like my experience. I do better in uncertain markets, and I don't do as well in more robust markets. And that's, it's simply because of mindset, right? You feel like you're being left behind a little bit, or, you're taking advantage of opportunities in times of uncertainty. And so, we really need to focus on our mindset, and we really need to focus on our clients' mindset, because if we're working with people who are fearful, well, they're less likely to transact. But if we're working with people who actually need to do something, those are people who we want to be around and are going to have a better mindset.
And, we're just agents. We're involved in this, like stockbrokers. We're involved in sales, whether prices go up or down. Personally, that doesn't impact what we do. And even if the market shrinks, and, the difference between the best market and the worst market in history, it's not like 0 and 7 million. I think the most sales ever in US has been like 7 million sales. The lowest has been 3.5. It's a 50% difference. Right now we're at about 5.5 just because there's not enough inventory. So even if the market shifts and we went down to 4, that's still a lot of sales. And the other thing that happens if we went down in sales, half the real estate agents leave. The opportunity for us to make money really doesn't change in the marketplace. You just have to be, in harder markets, you have to be better. In better markets, there's a lot of sales, but there's a lot of people scrambling for them. You just have to be scrappier.
Yeah. And so what you're describing essentially is market share. There are opportunities to claim and lose market share depending on market conditions. Obviously, more people are attracted to real estate as a career in a stronger market, and people are more likely to go back to their desk jobs when things become a little bit more challenging as far as the broader environment is concerned.
Yeah. So any agent out there, and I think probably mostly agents are listening to us, none of us, including myself, have any excuses ever, unless real estate brokers become obsolete, which is not the case, and it just never has been. Our opportunities, regardless of what's happening in the world around us, are consistent. You just have to have the sensory acuity to make some adjustments and keep your head on straight and not listen to the bullshit. And, it's really important to be good. Today, that is the one thing that is changing rapidly, and it has been. If you're not good at this, if you're not do your homework, if you're not schooled, you're not really taking this shit seriously and providing real value, you're going to be getting, you're not going to succeed. But so you really do have to be good. I mean, guys like Josh and I, we work our butt off, and we're very successful, and we're sitting there in conferences 10, 12 days a year. We're doing stuff like this. That's what it's all about. Really, actually, we have a craft that's very skilled. Doesn't require college, but requires a lot of skills, and that is important. And those skills are always changing. We are right now doing something right now that didn't exist a couple of years ago.
Yeah, no, that's very true. There are a lot of innovations that are coming out of this, but at the end of the day, what's most important is that you and I, we have PhDs and master's degree from the University of Life, and so we actually have real world experience dealing with people, putting transactions together, picking up on these, as we discussed earlier, these tells, both for buyers and sellers. You feel people that are into it, you feel people that are pulling away. But at the end of the day, what's most important is that we continue to work together collaboratively, and we have respect for one another. So Gary, one thing that I'd like to leave our audience with today is you also sold the Chartwell estate. So that eclipsed the Playboy Mansion by 50%. You sold the Playboy Mansion and the Hefner estate for $100 million. Chartwell went on to sell for $150 million. Now, you did say again?
Reportedly.
Reportedly. I'm sure there were things behind the scenes, but the recorded number, $150 million. Now, you didn't do that alone. You worked collaboratively, and you worked with other people. So you had an open mindset to how you were going to accomplish it as a team. Can you walk us through how that came to be?
It's interesting how those work. But there was a number of really good agents on Chartwell, and the Playboy Mansion. There was also good agents. That one, I kind of single-handedly took the reins on and getting it sold, but we did have other good agents on it. The Chartwell Mansion, I was really good at some of the marketing, really good at some of the contracts, but there were other people involved, and for sure, that really did some critical things on that. I collaborate a lot on sales. There's no question about it. Because
people probably come to you as a luxury expert. So they say, hey, Gary did these deals. Let's ask him for his opinion. And then you probably have an accretive value to the overall process between, gaining credibility with the prospective seller, your views on marketing, pricing, strategy. So you're really adding a lot of value to these situations, and you're coming in as a team player. So, what was that like?
I didn't really think much of it. I mean, there's some people on there that just trump me in terms of the deals they've done. And so it kind of worked out. We all did our thing, and it was fine. So I don't know what to, in the chart. I don't know what to say about that. I don't know if it was something. It was just interesting. I don't know what to really say about the collaborative effort of that sale, other than it, certainly was, and it was a big job, and was a lot to do there. I really can't get into specifics.
I can imagine. Recently we saw a couple of big deals actually fall through because buyers took advantage of their opportunity to get out due to the uncertainty of the pandemic. I know, Jeff Bezos backed out of one or two large deals in Los Angeles, and he's gone on to be, not only one of the wealthiest people in the world, but I saw an article yesterday that said that Bezos was said to be the first trillionaire in the world's history. Do you think that Bezos comes back to the LA market?
Well, he's got quite a few things here. Yeah, he's all in. He didn't leave that. Like he paid 165 for a house. So that was one deal he concluded. That doesn't so I would say he's a little involved. Yeah.
Yeah.
But,
well, I'd say $165 million is a pretty significant footprint.
Yeah, he beat our record.
Yeah, no doubt.
By 15.
No,
Yeah, I don't think he didn't buy it because of the money. Who knows why he backed out of that one.
Yeah. So Gary, I know that you shared that you wanted to be a comedian. You had this desire to be a writer. What do you do in your spare time? Do you have any hidden talents that maybe not everybody knows about? Are you flying planes, racing cars, sailing boats, chasing women?
No, I'm really good at certain things cooking. I like to burn shit. I'm really good at, I'm very good at cooking. I like to do yoga. I live at the beach, yoga, stand-up paddleboarding, riding my bike. Those are the things I like the most. I do a lot of speaking, and for me, it's just a delivery system to do shtick. So I really like speaking, and I do like doing videos, and I like making people laugh. This whole real estate thing is just really just a front for being a smart ass.
It's a side gig. So with that, Gary Gold from Hilton and Highland in Beverly Hills, the world's best smart ass. Thank you so much for joining us today, Gary.
Take care.
You too, man.